You are listening to the Dental Business Mastery Podcast, where you discover management insights and strategies for your successful dental practice. There are also interviews with key people in the industry who have advice and services to help you and your team achieve great success. Welcome to this episode of the Dental Business Mastery Podcast. And today I'm your host, Julie Parker, and I have a very special guest with me today, somebody who is a part of Dental Business Mastery and has been a part of all of the lessons that are in various areas such as online courses and the academy. And he also is a regular mindset, self-development coach and MC for any of our events. Welcome, Charles Kovess.
Thank you, Julie. Lovely to be with you in this special time. I think this is the first opportunity or the first invitation I've had to be on your podcast. So thank you.
Is it the first one? Gosh, I thought you were around maybe 150 episodes ago. Oh, how disgraceful. We're in the same house and everything.
Yes.
Because we're also married. And you are Australasia's passion provocateur. Just for people who are not aware of you, can you just give us a very quick rundown of your journey to date?
So I am Australasia's passion provocateur, and I was a happy, successful commercial tax lawyer for 20 years before changing career in 1993. And that occurred in 1993 because I went to business school in Hawaii with Robert Kiyosaki for 2 weeks. I went to that course as a lawyer, happy to be a lawyer for the rest of my life, and then what I learned in that 2 weeks, I made a decision that education was more important than law. So I then decided to teach people about passion, because at that course there were 150 people who paid a lot of money to be there, and I was the head of commercial law of the 10th biggest law firm in Australia. And many of those people did not know what they were passionate about. And I knew all my life what I was passionate about. So I decided I would become an educator about passion, a provoker about passion, a provocateur about passion, to provoke Australians, to provoke people all around the world to discover and pursue their passion. And one of my mantras is that greatness can only be achieved through passion. I understood the power of passion. I understood what life was like when you lived with passion compared to not living with passion. So I decided that the world would be a better place if there were more passionate people. So that's why I changed career, and I went cold turkey from a big income, 4 kids in private schools, to zero income. I had a little bit of resources, but taking or sending 4 children to private school is pretty expensive, and it's pretty easy to spend money, as you well know. So that's how it happened. And 33 years later, so I was a lawyer for 20 years, and for 33 years I've been Australia's passion provocateur. So that's how that came about.
Magnificent. It kind of leads into, in a sense, the topic that I wanted to talk to you about. I've been wanting to get you on the podcast for a number of months, just talking about the principles that you have developed and learned throughout your journey that really help you in your life, and you've shared them with me, and they've absolutely helped me in my life. And I've wanted to speak to you about these principles in maybe more than one podcast episode. But that shift in your career, I think, can lead into one particular niche that we're more aware of over the past few days because of an event that we hosted on Wednesday night. And that is the new dental practice owner. You went through a transformation in order to achieve success down this next journey, this next path that you wanted in your life. And I feel like with new practice owners that were at our event, the event was on Wednesday night. It was all around the perils of building your own dental practice from scratch. And if you don't get the right expert advice, you can land yourself in a pretty nasty bucket. And just so we can put the audience in its context, some of the stories that we've come across are, for example, a lease that's poorly written, that the leased premises is not able to be fulfilling its function. Another story has been a dental practice that was being fit out, and the company just took a long time to do the fit out. They were due to open in November. It was to a degree where some of the work people ended up like ghosting these new practice owners. It's now looking at an April opening. From March, they've been paying staff. They've been trying to fill their books with patients prior to opening. They have to move all those patients constantly. How can they market their practice effectively when they don't even have a start date and they're losing a lot of money? We had a Dr. Sass, we had a speaker who spoke about her particular situation as well, and just about the traps that you don't foresee when you are building your own practice from scratch. Enormously stressful. And some of the conversations that we had with attendees during the networking sections of that evening brought my mind more focused around the enormous stress. Yes, we've got to get the builders right. We have to get the finance, the insurances, marketing, staffing, so many things to do. But the mindset side of it, because it can be enormously stressful. And I was speaking to somebody who was saying, I don't want to lose everything. And it wasn't from a space of, I fear failure. It's, this is an enormous investment and I can't let this go wrong. And money is finite and I need to get to break even as quickly as possible. And the decision making around what to do when there's an enormous amount of stress is something that maybe is a good topic for today's conversation.
Yes, stress is an important topic, and a lot of people tell me they're stressed. So let's not only focus on a dental practice, but dentists are in our global environment where everybody says the world is in chaos. I promise you, I read the newspapers every day. I get a physical copy of the Australian. The world is in chaos. Now think about that. The world is not in chaos, but it keeps being written so that we're all acutely conscious of all. If you follow the news, we are acutely conscious of all of the problems happening in 200 countries around the world. And I often say to people, imagine being back 500 years ago, living in England in a village where all you knew about was what was happening in your local village and the two villages around you. You didn't know what was happening in the other 200 countries around the world. But today, we do. So we've got those two sets of stresses, our personal stresses and then stressed about all of the challenges that are happening on the planet, including fuel prices, and then fuel security, and then how am I going to get to work? And then some people are walking around saying we're going to be running out of food, and they're promulgating fear. So stress in our environment is entirely created in our minds. Best example of that is when we're asleep, we're not stressed. When we are under anaesthetic, a GA, we are not stressed because we're not aware of what's happening. So stress is created by us. And it first came into, and I talk a lot about stress in my programs, it first came into human usage around the 40s and 50s of this idea of stress. People talk about challenges and problems, but stress. And stress is used in engineering in creating buildings. And I suppose orthodontists also deal with the stress on teeth, in doing all the measurements. One of your clients does a lot of work in the sheer engineering of teeth. I love the whole idea of that stress. But stress, if you think of the Westgate Bridge in Melbourne and any bridge, there is stress if the force of gravity is pushing the building to go down, and then the pylons have to hold the building up, and there's stress between the pylons and the bridge itself. And in our lives, we are the bridge idea is the example where we've got external forces being imposed on us. So you mentioned financial forces. That's a big one for many people, but we've also got health forces. We've also got relationship forces, demands on our time. And we've also got information sources forces that are coming onto us. And the formula for stress is a very simple one, that stress equals force by resistance. Stress equals force by resistance. So in the bridge, the force is gravity and the pylons are the resistance, and that's the level of stress. You have to calculate, you have to make sure that your resistance is greater than the force so the bridge doesn't fall down. Now, in our own lives, our stresses are a function of forces and resistance. If we have zero resistance, then in the formula S equals F by R, and many people understand maths listening to this, and you're very good at maths, Julie, but you weren't at school, but that's another conversation as to how come you were no good at maths at school, but you're terrific in business. Stress equals force by resistance. If resistance is zero, there is zero stress. So if we don't resist anything that's happening to us, we will have no stress. And so take the financial one, because we are in an environment where that's really imposed on us. You've got to worry about money, and you go to school so you can get a job so you can earn money. So it's money, 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 as ABBA would sing, money, 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 always funny in a rich man's world. So if you had no resistance to lack of money, you wouldn't be stressed. And if the bank is ringing you, or if they're going to threaten to foreclose you, or you're going to lose your house, and you go, I don't care, I'm not going to resist that, I will just embrace every experience, then you would have zero stress. But you and I don't want to lose our house, we don't want to lose our stuff, most people don't want to lose their stuff, and so we resist. The important idea is that the forces that are on us, all imposed by other people, by banks, by children, by family, by neighbours, we can't control those forces. The only thing that we can control is resistance, and the resistance comes in our own minds. And that resistance, as I said, I just want to highlight what's that resistance. We resist poverty, we resist failure, we resist rejection, we resist poor health and death, we resist loss of status. So we're resisting all these things. And if we were to go broke, in our dental practice, then we would be we would be ashamed. And again, you think about this word ashamed. What does it mean to be ashamed? Or that other people would not think as highly of us, because we want other people to think highly of us. Most people, this is why we don't want to be rejected, because if we're rejected, they don't think highly of us. And so we're resisting. And when you unpack the resistance, then you can say, this is where my resistance is coming, which is causing my stress. And I'm not saying don't have stress. We need stress. You look at our birth, coming through the birth canal, stress. Stress is what makes us able to cope, but too much stress kills us. So there's this real balance. Zero stress will kill you. I call that getting Alzheimer's. If you have zero stress in your life, you will die of boredom or Alzheimer's or dementia. That's zero stress. And each one of us needs to, from our self-awareness, observe, am I too stressed? And then if I'm too stressed, I can't control the forces on me. What I can control is my resistance. And we make a conscious decision that says, let's take the financial one. If I go broke, my life will continue. We make that one decision. If I go broke, that's okay. My life will continue. And very few people in society start off with a large amount of money. Most of us start off at the end of our learning and our university days with not much money. Well, if you're 20 years down the track and suddenly you lose it all, each one of us is able to rebuild it if we embrace this challenge. And when you unpack that fear, we resist financial failure, and because we think our lives will be over, but they're not. All that we are is we're 42 years of age instead of 22 years of age, and we start again. And guess what? We would be much quicker at rebuilding than what it took us from 22 to 42. We could probably do in 5 years what it took us 20 years to do. So that's what I'm saying, that if you have too much stress, you reduce your resistance because you can't control the external forces. And I do this in my own life, and I don't suffer from undue stress.
The resistance thing was the first lesson you ever taught me. It was in the first few weeks of us knowing each other. And what I found very helpful was when I asked you, how am I resisting life? Because at that point, I thought I was easygoing enough. But what you helped me to see, and what I see in other people is, and what the audience might be able to tap into, is what does resistance look like? Resistance looks like, this isn't fair. I've worked too hard for this to be the outcome. This can't be happening. And all of the phrases that go on, the mental speak that goes on, that keeps us in that resistance rather than seeking alternative, more helpful thoughts to have, and indeed becoming very resourceful and thinking of all the other ways, the plan B, C, D, G, all the other ways we can live our life.
Yes, having alternatives is a wonderful way to understand that this is not the only way. I'm able to do that in my life because, and I'm sure many people listening to this conversation would know people who have had to leave everything to come to Australia. My parents had to leave Hungary to come to Australia. They arrived here with 2 suitcases. They left the country that they loved because they wanted to get away from communism. They wanted freedom. Like many immigrants to Australia, they want freedom. So that ability, or that was imposed on my parents. They didn't choose that. And from that lesson, I, in my mind, have made a decision that if you and I had to leave Australia, or if I had to leave Australia with just a suitcase, I've made a decision that I would survive. It's like that Gloria Gaynor song, isn't it? I will survive. However it goes, I won't sing that song. That if the worst happens, I would survive. And it's a great way to think of all of these challenges. And this issue that we go, that's not fair. Or the other force that we resist, of course, is change. It's not fair. This shouldn't be happening to me. And then you say to them, well, what does it mean to be fair? Or why do you deserve to have a life without these changes imposed on you, like millions of people around the world do? What makes you think you deserve? And I've let that thought go as well. And when you stop thinking that way, then you become more resourceful. As you said, plan A, plan B, there's our plan. But I'm open all the time to looking at a whole range of plans. And one of the great exercises to do, and I recommend this, is if you think you've got a problem, and of course everyone has problems. The particular problem that we're talking about, let's take financial. Well, I'm running out of money. My new practice is not being built quickly enough. I'm going to run out. I need $50,000. Here's the question: how can I get $50,000 quickly? Well, the exercise is to get a blank piece of paper, and at the top of the page you write, how can I get $50,000 quickly? And then write 20 answers to that question. Not 5, 20. And the first 5 are pretty easy. The next 5 are somewhat more difficult. 11 to 15 more difficult, and 16 to 20 very difficult. You go, hey, how can I come up with 20 different ways of getting $50,000. And often the gold is in the last five. The last five ideas you came up with, you go, wow, I never thought of that. And what we have to do is to put pressure on our brains to create genius. And our brains, in my view, in our minds, I should say, our minds are tuned into the energy of this planet and the energy of the universe. Carl Jung talked about collective consciousness. If you make your mind work, it can produce extraordinary answers. And the current answers that you think you have, I promise you, I guarantee you, I'll give you $1,000 guarantee, you will be able to create a whole range of new ideas, new solutions, if you put your mind under pressure.
Magnificent. And it's bringing to mind, you were interviewed by her. I interviewed her for the podcast. We've got her book on creative thinking, raising a creatively thinking child. Her name's escaped me, but I'll pop it in the show notes. And one of the things that she mentioned is, for when you are doing problem solving, you must separate the creative brain and the assessment brain. Because otherwise you'll come up, how am I going to get $50,000? Go to the bank, oh no, they won't give it to me. I'll go to my parents, oh no, they won't give it to me. And you judge the suggestions so swiftly, you end up with this thought of there is nothing I can do. And so have that main list, and just don't make a promise to yourself, I'm not going to judge any of these things. I'm just going to fill that list with all the things using the creative side of my brain before I then go through the list again and assess which ones I'm going to be thinking are very viable moving forward at the very start, and start utilizing those things. I wanted to step back very briefly, because I've always found this to be a very effective thing when we are talking about resistance and why me. By the way, for someone I read somewhere, why me? Why not you? That's wonderful.
Or as Stephen Fry, the UK commentator, thinker, when people say I'm offended, he says, I'm offended. Well, why? What right have you got not to be offended?
That's it. I don't listen into your telephone conversations when you're doing coaching calls with clients, but one of the things I do hear just from moving around the house when you are on some of these calls is, I have always presumed that the person has rung you and said, this is my current issue right now. And your response is always the same. You say, great. It's this instant embracing, because the opposite of resistance, would I be right to say, it's embracing it? It's going, fantastic, love that this is in my life. What am I going to do next?
Yes, this idea, we're talking about problems, and it's the problems that cause stress, isn't it? That's what we resist. We resist the problem that's in front of us. Let's just play the game of the $50,000 we're in deep need of. That's the problem. And look back at our lives, and one of the core principles that I teach, that I learnt from Buckminster Fuller, a genius who died in 1983, is that as human beings, our number one reward for solving problems is not peace, is not happiness, is not joy, is not progress. Our number one reward, in fact, our only long-term reward from solving problems, is bigger problems. Bigger problems, Julie. Isn't that exciting?
I'm excited.
I'm excited. Bigger problems. And the reason, you see, if you're stressed, you're not happy. And you're stressed because you've got a problem. And yet, when you solve this $50,000 problem, you will get a bigger problem, because that's how we grow. If you are solving the same problems you did 10 years ago, you are stuck. And by the way, that happens to be the case with most people. And the coaching that I do, and that can be with dental practice owners that I've done, and with CEOs of many large organizations, when you embrace this idea that the reward for solving problems is bigger problems, then I rightly say to you, embrace the problem, love the problem, because you actually deserve the problem, Julie.
Yes.
You deserve it. And again, then you're not wasting energy resisting the problem to say, I don't deserve this. The answer is yes, you do deserve it, because you created the circumstances in which this problem, this challenge came about. And it's only through solving problems that we become competent. That's why we give exams to children. It's a problem to face these exams. We give tasks to children to help them get better. Imagine if the only problem you and I had to do was to keep playing noughts and crosses for eternity. Just the same game, noughts, and you say, this is boring. And indeed it is.
And meaningless.
And meaningless. And the only reason why you resist your problems is because of your fear of failure. And there's another principle that this removes the stress as well. It's a wonderful idea. You say, when have I failed? What does failure mean? It's another word is mistakes. When you say, well, what is a mistake? And there's a great saying that says the only failure that you can have as a human being is the failure to participate. You see, that it's the idea in our heads that says, I want to build this dental practice. That's my goal. If I don't achieve that goal, I'm a failure. That's the flawed equation, and that's what creates the stress. If you have a goal of having a successful dental practice, that because you've picked the wrong professionals to help you, it fails. Well, that you failed to achieve that goal in that place. It doesn't make you a failure. And it means you've got now a bigger problem, because the money that you had, you've spent on that. Say, that's interesting. And I say to my clients, not only do I say, I go, wow, what an interesting problem. And the quality of your problem is the quality of the level at which you're playing life. Much easier to solve an 8-year-old child's problem than an 18-year-old child's problem, than a 28-year-old child's problem, or my 44-year-old daughter's problem. That's the way the problem game goes on. And most people make the mistake of thinking, I shouldn't have problems. You touched on it earlier. Why is this happening to me? I don't deserve this. I shouldn't have problems. Yes, you should have problems, because, as I said earlier, if you don't have problems, if you have zero stress, you will die, because that's God's way, that's the universe's way of saying, well, if you're not contributing to this planet, then it's time for you to go.
This brings me to your purpose in life. You think the purpose of life is to learn and grow. Learn and grow. And the space that all these new dental practices owners are in at the moment, and the things they're worried about, and their perceptions and thoughts that they've got going on in their brains around everything, meet up with them again 20 years down the track, and they won't be free of any of these issues, but they will have more helpful thoughts around all of these issues, because they would have moved through all the problems and become better and better. It reminds me, and I tell this story a number of times to clients, because I think it's a lovely example of why it is important to embrace all the challenges that we have in life. And it was an article that I read years and years ago, and they were talking about the concept of I'll edit this bit out because I'm trying to think of what does Tony Robbins say about
strong identity, compelling future?
No, that's right. And Tony Robbins speaks about this, but I think others have as well. This concept of the goals that we have for the coming year, as opposed to the goals that we have for the coming 10 years, we often overestimate what we can get done in 1 year and underestimate what we can get done in 10 years. And I thought, what? I don't understand that. Because I know that if anybody has ever said to me, where will you be in 10 years? I always have the same answer. I'm going to be freaking awesome. I'm going to be living in a palace, and I'm going to have other people do all the shit tasks for me. I'm going to have the best friends in the world. It's going to be magnificent. I'm like, that's big goals for 10 years. I didn't quite understand it. So when I did some research, I came across this article, and they were talking about this online game called Osmos. And back a few years ago when I checked again, it's still available. And this game in Osmos is you're a atom floating around in the medium. And as you're floating around in the medium, you are coming across other atoms. And you will bump into some of these atoms if you're not careful. If you bump into an atom that is smaller than you, then you will gobble it up and you become that little bit bigger. However, if you bump into an atom that is larger than you, it will gobble you up and that's the end of the game. So obviously the purpose of the game is to last as long as you can and gobble up as many small atoms as possible. Think of these atoms as challenges. You enter the game at a certain size. So you enter your dental practice journey, ownership journey, at a particular size. Every time you overcome a challenge that you are capable of overcoming, you get bigger and bigger and bigger. And at the start of the game, these larger atoms that you were trying to avoid, otherwise that would be game over, you don't realize it, but now you have overcome so many challenges that your capability is now larger than that other atom. And you can go ahead and bump into that and you will overcome it and you'll become bigger and bigger all the time. And I think this concept of why me? Why problems? I don't like problems. I wish where there weren't enough problems. And one of the common things we hear about in dental practices is running a dental practice and working in a dental practice would be so easy if it weren't for all the problems the patients deliver. But to recognise that, and that allows us to go, great, and embrace the challenges very easily because in essence what you're doing, you're like a little child who is learning to walk. And that little child says, oh, I don't like not being able to walk. It's hard. So I'm just going to sit here and just not walking.
Or I'll get my parents to give me a wheelchair.
That's right.
So I've been in a wheelchair for the rest of my life. So this idea, this comes back to the stress issue. When you understand this journey of problem solving, then the frustrations that happen in the practice disappear or reduce dramatically because it doesn't cause you undue stress. Imagine if you came to work every day and you never had a stressful problem. Touching on this again, you think that's the utopia that you want, but you actually don't. And I'm thinking of a show we saw recently around 19th century of being a princess in a castle. And Lady Di talked about it, and many people who marry into royalty, they become birds in gilded cages. They're in a castle, they've got the most beautiful clothes in the most beautiful building, no worry about money ever again. Just imagine if you're in that sort of life. After about 2 months, you'd be knowing that for the rest of your life, you're going to be in this castle. You know, you might go out to some events. There's nothing stressing you. How dull. And this, we are, as human beings, we are not meant to not challenge ourselves. It's the learning, and that ties into my purpose of learning and growing. We are here to learn and grow, and you can only do that by solving bigger problems. So how do you get out of the space when you are stressed? The answer is gratitude. So the gratitude exercise involves you focusing on what you are grateful for. Now, most people, when I say, what are you grateful for, they can't come up with a list of what they're grateful for because they don't think about it. And I urge everyone listening to this podcast to focus on what they're grateful for. So, give you an example. I'm grateful that I'm married to you.
Haha, nice.
Notice everybody, that's a good answer. Number 2, I'm grateful that I live in Australia. Number 3, I'm grateful that my parents chose to come to Australia. 4, I'm grateful that my parents were wise. And my dad, who died some years ago, he was particularly wise. My mum's been a great mum. She's still alive at 93. Number 6, I'm grateful that I'm healthy. Number 7, I'm grateful that I have 5 healthy children. Number 8, I'm grateful that I've learned how to harness the power of my mind. Number 9, I'm grateful that I'm good at golf. And it goes on and on. My list of things that I'm grateful for is very long. And so I urge all of you to focus on that, because what you haven't got is far greater. If you focus on what you haven't got, this idea of the 10-year goal that you were talking about, if that's what you're focused on and you say, I will only be happy when I achieve that goal, coming back to what we've been talking about, understand that if you achieve that 10-year goal and perhaps you achieve it in 7 years, guess what you're going to do? Guess what you're going to do, Julie? You're going to create another 10-year goal, and you will be happy for a month. You spent 7 years getting this big goal, all right? You were unhappy, unhappy, unhappy. Oh, I've achieved the goal. I'm now happy. And after a month or 2 months, you'll go, what now? And then you'll create another 10-year goal, and then you'll be unhappy for another 7 years while you achieve that 10-year goal. What sort of life is that? What sort of life? So that goal setting, creating a new dental practice of having this many patients or having this much income, that's the value of goal setting is to help you be strategic, to help you design strategies and tactics are subsets of strategies to achieve the goal that you think you presently want. That's and you can't, because you can't do everything. You have to choose what to do, and you can't choose what to do unless you're clear on what you want to create. That's why goals are valuable. They help us make decisions. And then coming back to the stress, you go, I want that goal. That's what I'm working to, but you must let go of attachment to results. I learned this a long time ago, and I quote Neil Donald Walsh in my book, Passionate People Produce, in his book, Conversations with God. And God says to Walsh, allegedly in these conversations, he says, pursue your passion, pursue your goal, create a magnificent dental practice, have a goal of creating it, but let go of attachment to the result. Pursue it and be happy in the moment while you are pursuing it, and don't withhold your happiness until you have achieved that. God says live without attachment to results. And I find that's a wonderful way to live. I'm clear on what I'm wanting to create. I don't hold back on being happy in my life on the basis that I'll be happy when. And that's how most people live their lives. And secondly, why are most people unhappy? It's because they've got problems. And I say the only people with no problems are dead people. If you've got no problems, you're essentially in a cemetery. And of course, if you've been buried and you went to hell, then you've got lots of problems for eternity.
So enormously helpful, Charles. Thank you so much. There's so many avenues I'd like to take the conversation down, so maybe some more conversations on future podcast episodes is a good idea.
I will be happy to do that, because there are a lot of elements to this, and then unpacking it. But the other thought I want to leave is that practice makes better. Practice doesn't make perfect. It's a lie. Practice makes better. The best examples of that are golfers. So the best golfers in the world get nowhere near a perfect round. None of us are living life perfectly. And one of my friends, Jerry Brady, gave me this great quote, and I've quoted it often, I'm sure you have as well, that the desire for utopia is insanity. So this idea that you want the world to be perfect, that everybody living in harmony and there's no problems, is such an insane idea. And then when you understand that, then you stop thinking, gosh, I wish there wasn't a war in Iran. I wish there wasn't problems in Somalia and Sudan. No, these are the problems. And you look back at history, and there's always been problems. And that's the great lesson to take on board, that no, the great life is not the life without problems. The great life is embracing the problems, knowing we deserve them, not being overly stressed by them, and waking up every morning being grateful that we are alive, to enjoy the wonderful aspects of our lives for which we are grateful. It's a great way to live, and that's how I live.
How glorious and beautiful. Thank you so very much. And if there are dentists out there or any dental team members out there that think they would like a bit more of this kind of coaching in their world, how can you help them?
Well, all I have to do is make a phone call. And my philosophy in the coaching process is not to go through a process. It's to identify, like a golf coach does, to look at what is it that stops the next level of progress. And often it is a 1 or 2% shift in our behavior, or a shift in our thinking, which leads to a 1 to 2% shift in our behavior, that can make a wonderful unblocking. And if you like, I'm like a laxative of shifting constipated thinking around certain issues, but identifying that is what I bring to the table. And that's based on 50 plus years of business experience and life experience. And the coaching sessions go for six 1-hour sessions, and they literally change people's lives. So I recommend it. It works well. It's not confronting. I don't put people into a crying state, Julie. I don't break them down and say, no, you're absolutely stuffed. No, I'll help you solve your current problems so that you attract and solve bigger problems. That's how it works.
And certainly it's been a life-changing process for me to have your assistance in my life. And we are talking about the experience of life. Life will happen. It's our experience of it that allows us to be happy, sad, stressed, frustrated, what have you. And I am extraordinarily astounded by the amount of stuff that can be happening around our world. And I have got a constant level of calm and gratitude. And it allows for my problem solving to be easier, better, and better results all the time. And my experience of life is happy. So thank you for your impact on my life. And I would encourage other dental practices, owners and team members, if you want this kind of assistance, you too can experience it very swiftly. And so just to reach out to Charles, all his details are in the show notes.
Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. If you enjoyed this podcast, then I encourage you to head over to Amina and my website, dentalbusinessmastery.com.au. You will find all the information that you need if you would like to gain our assistance in helping you and your team achieve great success. If you would like to find out more, you can also email us directly at info@dentalbusinessmastery.com.au. Thanks so much for listening.